like to call this meeting to order. Excuse me, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to your Innovation Grants, Technology, Commerce, and Trade Committee. I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilmember Krikorian, Buscaino, and Martinez. And we'll just get started. I'm going to try. We have a lot of back-to-back hearings this afternoon, so I'm going to try to move this hearing as expeditiously as possible. So, Mr. Espinosa, are there any general public comment cards?
No, there are not.
Okay, general public comment is closed. And we will move to item 1. If Mr. Espinosa, will you please read that into the record?
Item number 1 is a motion from Council Members Martinez and Wesson relative to the feasibility of adding languages to the MyLA 311 mobile phone application to enable non-English speaking residents to utilize this tool.
And are there any cards on this item?
No, there are not, Mr. Chair.
No cards. Okay. Mr. Ross, if you come to the table. Welcome.
Thank you. Ted Ross, General Manager with the Information Technology Agency. There are few responsibilities that LA residents and businesses value more than core basic services. Whether it's fixing a pothole, covering graffiti, or repairing a street light, these are fundamental services asked for by our residents and businesses. Managing the 311 call center, the Information Technology Agency is proud to be on the front line, answering questions, providing information, and helping take city service requests. Since August alone, there have been over 850,000 requests that have been entered into our system, and that averages about 120,000 every month. In recent years, this has shifted from just a call center to the use of mobile and web applications. In fact, we're now at 17% electronic requests as a percent of our total 311 service requests. However, the current website and mobile app are only offered in the English language. Needless to say, Los Angeles is a world-class city, and access to its services should be available across a variety of languages. While the call center has both native speakers and a translation service, our electronic services currently do not. So as stated in the council motion, we completely agree that all non-English speaking residents deserve direct access to LA services. So based on our research, we identified 2 compelling options when it came to providing those services. Number 1 is to build the capabilities into our existing system. The benefits of that is that this option would provide high-quality translation. We would take the information from the current site, we would use translation services, and then we would be able to farm them out through the system. It's quite a complex process, but it's a process in which we could basically translate all existing services and city service inquiries, and we'd be able to translate it across both the form, but across the website, so that all the informational requests could be read in that language as well as into the mobile app. The disadvantage of that is that it takes substantial time to implement. It's also much harder to maintain. As you can imagine, every time you make a change in that service, you'd have to go through translation services before you'd make the adjustments. And there's quite a few articles that we currently support and maintain. There's also a cap on the number of languages, 28, and it's a fairly expensive option. The implementation cost that we identified would be about $150,000 for the first language, about $10,000 or so for translation, and about $110,000 for subsequent languages. So it's certainly one of the reasons why we haven't been able to accomplish it yet, but there's a significant cost involved. However, there's a second option, and this is an option that we believe we want to recommend. There's all sorts of technological advances around Google Translation is a good example, in which you take an existing website and you run the Google Translation API, and it translates what's on your screen into the other language. Certain cities are using it. So, for example, the City of Chicago's website, its homepage, allows you to go to it, and it will default based on your browser, and then you can select languages on the upper right. They highlight some of the common languages in the City of Chicago, as well as you have the choice of up to 104 languages that will go ahead and translate the page almost immediately. It does it in a fraction of a second. It's easy to maintain, it's much less expensive, and it's much faster to implement. However, there is a disadvantage with option number 2. The accuracy of the translation, of course, depends on the Google Translation service, so you'd certainly want to make the statement that this is based on that and not to necessarily rely on it in such a way. Often we find those kinds of services are transliterations in some aspects, so we tried to just off the cuff use certain native speakers and have them read through it, and while they found it understandable, there's probably different nuances that a translation service would certainly be able to provide better. But I think also it's worth mentioning that option number 2 would translate our web service options. So all of our city service directory articles of information as well as the web form, it would not translate it on the native app. So the MyLA mobile app that goes onto your phone, that service would not be able to run on that service specifically. The cost associated with it is about $30,000. So whereas before it would be around $160,000 for the first language, around $110,000 for subsequent languages, and significantly harder to maintain in the coming years. This would be about $30,000. It would work to about 104 languages, but it would work on the web portal, so items submitted online through the portal, as well as for all the city service directories, and would not cover the Google app. So those were the 2 items. The ITA's recommendation, but it's certainly subject for discussion, would be to pilot the Google Translate option. That would be option number 2. It's something that could be implemented in a matter of about a month and a half, and we would use analytics to try to assess its effectiveness. We have easily of our electronic services, over 40% are being submitted through the web portal, so this would certainly give access to their ability to submit the information and be able to view it online. And being that this is not something we're currently funded for, our second recommendation were to work with the CAO to try to identify potential special funds to try to pay for this service.
Thank you. Start with Ms. Martinez to write.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. I'm a huge fan of the 311 app. It's worked really well. In my district, as long as we teach people how to download the app and sort of how to navigate, but it would work even better if we would translate it into Spanish and other languages. I think it'd be a lot more accessible to a lot more people. But the 30,000 that you just mentioned, is that just a that's just
one-time cost?
One-time cost?
Effectively, yes.
And it would include, so it does, you talked about the Google app. Do we have to pay for that, or is that already?
Google offers the Google Translation API, and so it would allow us to be able to leverage that on the page. So really the 30,000 is implementation services, but it's not an ongoing cost. It's relatively a one-time cost. Of course, as you change your site in the future, you'll have to take certain things into consideration, but the reality is it's effectively a one-time cost. It's not a subscription we pay for.
And how do you deal with the accuracy of translation, though? A lot of times, even if you were to, I've used Google Translation before, and sometimes it's, even in Spanish, not everything you...
That's definitely one of the disadvantages.
Not everything translates.
I've got family across the world, and even if I want to order them, let's say, presents around the holidays, I may go onto an Amazon site, and I'll use Google Translate to try to figure that site out there. And obviously, there's certain things that translate fairly well and some things that don't. I think when it comes to the city services directory for a full article, likely it'd be fairly easy to be able to get the understanding because you have paragraphs of information. But if something's fairly concise and the translation's a little bit off, I think you raise a good point. And so that's kind of what we're balancing out is that I would agree the better option is to have the resources and the investment to be able to do the translation. I just know we run into the issue of spending a significant amount of money per language. The city clerk has about something like 11 languages in which they provide the information, so I know it can get quite expensive. So it really is kind of a balancing act of the speed and the efficiency of a Google Translate option and some of its limitations versus a much better translation that's done through a professional service, but it comes at a cost, both one time and the maintenance of it.
And there isn't a way in which the city translation services can go back and make sure it was translated correctly?
Every time you load that page, the Google Translate service retranslates the page on top of it. So we are very much reliant on how Google Translate would work in that situation. But I must mention, City of Chicago and I believe City of New York have also been leveraging this for some time. So we wouldn't be necessarily the first, and I say that in a good way. So they've been able to leverage it, I think, and it does do up to 104 languages. So it wouldn't just cover our classic languages that we're familiar with, but it'd be able to cover everything from Zulu and Swahili to a variety of other languages that likely we wouldn't be able to pay to do a professional translation on.
So are you looking for direction to move forward with piloting the Google translation? Or was this just a verbal report?
It's a verbal report to be able to facilitate discussion, but we certainly have our recommendation based on the information that we found. But we're certainly open for further clarification.
And we're going to ask for, excuse me, a written report at the end of this
Okay.
to follow up, but this is sort of getting us started on the
Get
conversation.
your feet wet.
Then you're going to come back for direction to move forward with the pilot? I mean, shouldn't we just do that today? At least to initially go out and look for the $30,000 that you need to implement it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly comfortable with that option
Yeah.
to get started with, but I think we need to get them to write the written report so that we have the paper trail on all of this. But I don't have a problem with us as a committee directing them to move forward on the first option. The bigger option, when you start talking about, 9 languages at $110,000 a year, it's $1 million thing, probably is going to have to be a budget request and go through that process. And
But you're recommending to go with option 2 anyways.
We want to be very responsive, and honestly, I feel very passionately about this topic also. I represent here as a CIO for the city of Los Angeles, a very diverse world-class city, and yet some of our core services aren't really representing our constituents and our citizenry. So I feel pretty passionate about it too. So we wanted to be able to be very fast and responsive on it. That option would allow us to move fairly quickly. Of course, knowing that there are additional options, and we would love to be able to report back even on the effectiveness of it. We like the idea that if we were to use those translation services of using analytics that could identify that if non-English speakers went to those sites, did they bounce off the sites quickly? Did they not use it? Did they run into potential issues? So we think there may be some ways electronically of identifying its success.
I've gone as far as translating how to download the app for folks, but once you download the app, everything's in English, so
Correct.
we kind of get stuck. So I'd like to see this move forward as soon as possible.
Now, just to be clear, that what you were saying is the app itself does not have Google Translate,
Correct.
which is a problem because most of the inquiries come in 60% from the app and only 40% from the website.
Correct.
So the Google fix here, just so we all have our eyes wide open here, is only a step in the right direction because it only deals with 40% of the traffic, and it only deals with the online traffic, not with the app.
Correct.
And there's no auto service for translating the app, right?
Correct. It is a custom-built app that's running off of your phone, and it's not necessarily running through a classic web browser. So I'll say this way, that the infrastructure of running it on the website gives us additional capabilities, whereas a mobile app, just the way it runs, does not give us those same capabilities.
And of course, we could and we probably should have a button on the app that says, if you want to have a translation, click here and it'll take you to the web portal instead of using your app. That would be a logical and easy thing to do.
I would agree. I think there's additional capabilities for us to figure out once we have the capability of how to migrate users and be able to send traffic appropriately.
Because using your phone doesn't necessarily mean using the app. You can report a bulky item through your phone through the web browser, and that would be translated. But to use the My 311 app, which we really like, it won't be translated.
Did we build the app in Spanish?
One could, and we would be utilizing option 1 for that. So we would be building it completely, and we start to also run into the maintenance issues. If we made an improvement on one, we have to make it on the other, and so we'd be maintaining 2 apps.
Additional questions or comments, colleagues? So what I'm going to recommend here is, like the direction, we want to direct you to move forward on the $30,000 option to try to find resources to do that, and also to report back with a written report for this item so that we can formalize that process.
Correct.
Any without objection? Okay, that'll be the order. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Espinosa, would you read item number 2, please?
Item number 2 is report from the Board of Airport Commissioners relative to authorizing and approving the issuance and sale of Department of Airports Los Angeles International Airport revenue bonds.
And are there any comments cards on the public?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Yakubik. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Los Angeles World Airports. As you all know, LAX has a fairly significant capital program underway. The item before you today is looking for authorization to issue $2.2 billion in airport revenue bonds as a component of the plan of finance for a little over $4 billion in capital improvements at the airport. The debt service costs from these bonds will be recovered through our annual airport rates and charges, terminal rents and airfield charges in particular. So there will be no impact on the general fund. We're recommending a negotiated sale for these bonds involving 6 separate banking teams. These teams were selected through a competitive process. The teams are well diversified between both small and emerging banks and Wall Street size firms as well. The bonds are expected to be sold over the next 24 to 30 months, and I am happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks. So the cost of service is 15%?
Beg your pardon?
There is the cost of issuance, capitalized interest, debt service is those costs are estimated at $327 million, or about 15%, right?
Yes, that is mostly capitalized interest, which is covering the cost of interest on the bonds until the assets are placed into service, and then we can actually start charging that debt service to our ratepayers.
So explain that. So that 15% is for how long a period of time?
It just equates to the amount of money for each bond issue. It could be anywhere from 6 months to a year between the time we borrow the money and actually use it and can put it into a rate-based fee and charge.
Is that, and I don't do enough of these bonds to know it, but that jumped out at me as a high number.
Actually, we are the way we've structured this to have 6 different debt issuances is actually meant to decrease that number. It could be significantly larger if we borrowed all of the funds upfront in one large bond issue. So by having 6 separate debt issues, we're more closely matching our cash flows to when the money is needed, so we're not just carrying around large amounts of debt and paying interest on it while we're not using it.
Okay, so you're comfortable with the 15% you said is a good number, not a bad number?
Yes, I think it's a good number, and our intent is to certainly make it as small as possible.
That number will decrease over time?
It should be shrinking as we go along. So every time we issue bonds, the closer we can time our bond sales to when those funds are needed, the smaller that amount of money we'll get. So we'll borrow less effectively.
Right. Okay. And are there projects that have been put on pause pending this?
No, these projects are underway. These projects largely stretch out over a period of the next probably 3 to 4 years. These include very large tenant projects where we have predefined improvement acquisitions that are scheduled for anywhere from 18 months to 36 months out into the future. So this is getting ahead of the curve, so we have the authority when we get there.
Colleagues, any additional questions?
So there seems to be so much uncertainty in the stock market right now. Are your advisors, do they anticipate our ability of getting a good rate, even though it's so uncertain out there?
Well, as much uncertainty has occurred in the stock market has actually driven interest rates even lower as investors are looking for safer assets, and bonds are typically considered safer assets. The airport, in fact, is a AA rated credit, so we're actually considered one of the safest types of assets to invest in. So the cost of borrowing has actually been driven from what was previously historic lows to even lower lows from there. So we actually think this is an ideal time, our advisors and staff as well.
Are there a lot of bond offerings out there?
Bond offerings are typically driven by the capital needs of whatever municipality is doing or whatever general funds across the nation are. We don't see any significantly larger calendar this coming year or next year than we have in the past.
Okay, so without objection, I'm going to approve the CAO and LAWA recommendations. Seeing no objection, that'll be the order. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. And we're going to take number 4 out of order, and then we'll end up with number 3 at the end. So would you, Mr. Espinosa, would you please read item number 4?
Item number 4 is a report from the Board of Harbor Commissioners relative to a memorandum of agreement to transfer China Shipping amended stipulated judgment funds to the Harbor Community Benefit Foundation to administer air quality improvement projects.
Mr. Cannon, report. If you could provide us a brief summary of the China Shipping Community Mitigation Fund. Actually, before we get started, Mr. Cannon, you wanted to set the context here.
No, exactly. I just wanted you to tee it off that way. What you just did is provide for our new members here on committee, briefly, because I know we're on time constraints here, why the Harbor Community Benefit Foundation exists today and what it's used for.
Thank you.
The Harbor Community Benefit Foundation is set up to provide projects and programs for the community, the Wilmington and San Pedro community. It's been set up with funding. It's been supported by the Port of Los Angeles, and it's set up with funding for the community. And there are regular contributions to their operating budget by the port in order to administer funds for projects in the local community. The board is comprised of people that are prominent in the community, and the Port of Los Angeles contributes and supports this organization. Is that sufficient?
And as far as the parameters, how far out we can use these dollars within the harbor area communities, is it port property, or can we extend into the community?
Generally speaking, it's port property, but there has been the State Lands Commission, has been flexible with the way it interprets that. So it's either port lands or adjacent port lands
So if
that
we wanted
are
to green-
impacted by the community.
Understood. If we wanted to green the community on Avalon Boulevard and install 200 trees, or on Gaffey Street to green our main corridors, would that fall within the parameters?
It sure does. In fact, there have been projects that have been developed in those areas specifically along Gaffey and Pacific both, and also the same is true over in Wilmington. So yes, sir, very much.
Thanks for the historical reference.
Okay, I didn't know how much detail you wanted me to get into. Good. So this is quick, unless you want me to.
Please.
Okay, so there is leftover money from the China Shipping amended stipulated judgment. It resulted in $75 million of settlement money for projects in Wilmington and San Pedro. There was money for Gateway Cities, which was a air quality project, and then there was a general air quality mitigation fund, as well as an aesthetic mitigation fund, and the grand total was $75 million. Right now, there is $9.2 million left over from the air quality and aesthetic funds, and so by requirement of the amended stipulated judgment, the parties have to select an independent third party to manage the money, the remainder of the money. The parties in this case, I don't need to repeat them, you know who they are. They selected actually two independent funds, or managers. One is the Harbor Community Benefit Foundation, and the other is the South Coast Air Quality Management District. So they split the money. They sent $5.2 million roughly to the Harbor Community Benefits Foundation and $4 million to the South Coast Air Quality Management District. This was agreed to by the litigants. The $4 million would support the overhead catenary project that the AQMD is doing along Alameda Street there, and then the $5.2 million would go to administer air quality projects to benefit Wilmington and San Pedro. The reason we are only bringing the Harbor Community Benefits Foundation contract to you is that it's for 5 years and therefore requires City Council approval. The South Coast agreement is 3 years and therefore did not require City Council approval. So it's actually already been signed.
The South Coast one with the wire on
The catenary, yes.
that wire. Just so I understand what it means, I just picture like a trolley car with a wire on top. Is that
Exactly
correct?
it. Exactly right.
Right.
It's exactly. It's I mean, it's the details are there's a few little differences, but
Any
it's
sparks that fly?
We kind of, yeah. It's, the older ones have sparks and newer ones don't, but you install a catenary device on top of the cab of a truck, and then when the truck gets near the catenary inside the cab, you push a button, and the little catenary goes up, and it touches the wires, and then it travels along, and then when the truck is ready to leave the area where there are wires, push another button, catenary goes back down, and the truck goes on about its way. The add-on device is about $70,000.
For each truck?
I'm sorry?
For each truck?
Per each truck.
75,000?
For each truck. So expensive. The idea is to support electric vehicles or other types of vehicles, battery and other types of vehicles. In some cases, the potential is even that the catenary could help charge the battery, but at a minimum, it could keep the vehicle from operating on its own battery. It operates on independent electricity. And as I said, it can also operate with combustion-based vehicles as well.
I know we're not really talking about that one, we're talking about the other one, but we're just piquing our curiosity. So they paid $75,000 so that they can drive for a mile.
Yeah.
It's expensive.
I mean, it's an added cost to drive just that 1 mile each way.
The theory, in fairness, is that the mile is just a demonstration project,
Right.
and that in fact it would be installed for longer stretches, for instance, along the 710, or possibly the freeway that goes from the port up to the rail yards, and so that's the theory.
Same technology is used in Germany, from what I understand, right?
Siemens is the company that's developed this, and they have been using it in Germany, very similar to what's used on trains in other places, here in the United States as well, with Metro and things like that. So it's very similar technology. It is, however, Councilmember, as you notice, expensive.
Well, since we're talking, the item before us is really about the other $5.2 million. Are there shovel-ready projects that the Community Benefits Foundation are planning on funding with that $5.2 million, or is it?
They're going to go through a process. They receive the applications for projects, and I'm sure there are plenty of projects that people are interested in doing. I am not familiar with the details of what is being ready to be submitted, but this is a very popular foundation with the community. They're very happy about its presence and are happy that it continues to get funded. So I have no doubt that there will be projects that will be in the community and will be available for people to apply for. So it's a good group. We're very happy to support them.
We had a change in leadership with the Harbor Community Benefit Foundation, is that correct? A new executive director.
Now you
came in.
just got me.
I'm sorry, Chris. A new director came in. And
That's right. No, I know. And you're going to ask me the name, and I've forgotten the name.
Brad S., I believe.
I
Schnooter.
apologies, council members.
the-
Yeah, but yes, you're absolutely right, Joe. That's exactly what has happened. I knew you were going to, when I said yes, you were going to then ask me the name, and I knew I was going to have to say, uh-oh.
Brad, I believe. Yep.
Colleagues, any questions on this item? Joe?
We're good, thank you.
Great. So we're going to move to approve the CAO and port recommendation without objection. That'll be the order. And now we'll move to our last item, item 3. Mr. Espinosa, if you would read that into the record.
Item number 3 is verbal report from the Los Angeles Harbor Department relative to the top 10 departmental priorities.
Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. Tony Gioiello, Deputy Executive Director of Development at the Port of LA. And actually, the priorities here that we're given is, our CIP priorities. Not obviously, they don't cover all the priorities in the port, but from a capital development standpoint, these are the priorities that we presented last time that I was here at the committee. And today here, just to give you an update of where we're at on making progress in these projects. So I'd like to start with our Trade Pack program. This is a container terminal, our first automated terminal within the Port of Los Angeles. The first program is our buildings and gate project and our backland projects. There are 3 projects within the program that I just want to give you a quick update. The first is the backland automation portion. We call it phase 2 to 4 is how we call this project. We're actually about 60% done with this project. We do anticipate completion of this backland work by the end of the year. We have delivered about 11, actually we have delivered 11 of the 21 rows that will be in this terminal. So that portion is going fairly well. We're on budget, we're on schedule for that, actually ahead of schedule. Our terminal buildings and gate was another major element, about an $80 million element of the program. We have actually completed that under budget and a little bit ahead of schedule. We actually achieved a LEED Gold rating for the administration building for the TRAPAC building. The last building is our train maintenance building. It's a smaller building, so just under $10 million project. And actually the superstructure will start being erected this week on that project. We anticipate coming in on budget on this project. Another element of the TRAPAC program is our intermodal container transfer facility. This is the rail yard where the trains will come in to unload the cargo and be loaded up to be transported outside of the area. We're about 95% complete with this project. Again, we're trending under budget, and we do anticipate actually to be ahead of schedule on this. We're approximately, like I said, 95% complete for this. We actually anticipate turning over the rail yard next month to TRAPAC so that they can start bringing in some test trains and using the yard for testing of this technology. The next program we highlighted was our YTI Container Terminal Wharf Deepening Project. We are in construction on that, and all I can say is we actually are on target, on schedule, and on budget on this program. The next programs we have is our SR 47 110 Freeway Projects. That's a series of 3 projects we have that are in series together. These projects are, again, very close to completion. The SR 47 from the Vincent Thomas Bridge and 110 all the way up to the Gibson off-ramp should be done within the next 2 months. Again, trending on schedule, on budget on those projects. The work going on right now is mostly landscaping and some other work in that area. We have been hit hard by graffiti within this area. Once we get it, we put up some sound walls. We've been hit. I think we spent over $100,000 so far in just graffiti abatement. Once we're done with the walls, Caltrans will take over those walls as far as the graffiti. The port will take over maintenance of the landscaping for the next 3 years on those, though.
Thanks for the graffiti abatement. I know you guys are staying on top of it.
Yeah. Next project is the Alternative Maritime Power, the AMP program for the cruise terminal. We'll be advertising that for construction this month. That's, again, about a $13 million project. This is to accommodate the larger cruise ships that are calling at the port right now to give us a lot more flexibility in how we plug in those ships. The next program to talk about is the LA Waterfront Program.
Right, let's go. Say it.
Joe's favorite
So far down the list.
No specific order, right?
No priorities. There's no priority listing here, right?
You mean in Venice?
It's just not Joe's list.
I thought it was a reference to the LA River.
Yeah, the other waterfront, right? I should let you do this presentation.
No, go ahead.
You did a great job last week on explaining what's going on here. But the Sampson Way project is one of the first elements out there. It's actually advertised last week for construction. I do have to thank the councilman for putting together a working group that's worked with us and other city departments this last year to get this project all coordinated and out the door. And so we still are working with DOT and Water and Power and a couple elements that we're coordinating with. But again, the project is out to bid, and it's the first start of this entire Ports of Call redevelopment project. So we're very proud and happy we got this project on the street. We are designing right now the promenade and the town square element of the waterfront. We are coordinating with the proposed developer of the new Ports of Call area, and so that's moving ahead also. We anticipate being done with design and advertising about a year from now is what the plan is. Again, we'll try to do it sooner. We will get in there and do some elements sooner, like some demolitions and some cleanup of the areas in preparation of the construction. The Wilmington Waterfront is also under design right now. We have Sasaki on board, and we will be planning to go out to the community in probably in the next month or two to show the concept design of that proposed development. We also are starting design of the Wilmington pedestrian bridge that will be complementary to the waterfront area in Wilmington. We'll be probably going out within a month or two for the design services there. It's about a $14-15 million pedestrian bridge that crosses over a set of railroad tracks in the area. And then the Ports of Call development project itself, there is actually a public presentation tomorrow night at 6 o'clock at the Warner Grand Theater. And this is where the developer will start showcasing and showing what the plan is for the new development. So we're hoping that we will get a very good turnout at the Warner Grand, and it should be a very exciting presentation. Next project on our plate right now is the 10 megawatt solar power program we have. Actually, in January, I believe, or actually, I'm sorry, December, City Council approved their operating agreement with Hecate Energy for the solar installations. They are actually working, looking at the sites that were approved. Some sites that they had identified early on may not be feasible, so we are working with them to identify other sites within the port to put in the solar installations. But we are very confident that we'll make our 10 megawatt solar installations through Hecate. In fact, just last week, or week before, I can't remember now, the Crafted Warehouse and the brewery opened up I think it was a 1.2 megawatt installation on top of their warehouses. And so that counts for our 10 megawatts commitment to the Attorney General's office.
Does the MOU with the Attorney General set a time frame?
It does. We actually amended this agreement last year. We have till 2018 to meet the 10. We missed the first deadline that we were given because of cost issues, because of some other issues. We weren't able to deliver and identify all the sites. But right now, it's somewhere in 2018, we have the obligation to make those. We'll probably make most of those by the end of this 2016 is what we're anticipating right now. We have a very motivated developer in Hecate to get these done.
And is there something in the MOU that you have to negotiate if you're going to miss some of them, or how does that work?
In the Attorney General's?
Yeah.
If we look like we're missing again, we'll have to go back and I guess renegotiate or just inform them. But we are under.
Is there a penalty or something that
there's no
is there a hammer that comes down in some way?
No real hammer, but we have an obligation. I mean, there's no hammer. I'm sure there will be a hammer coming down on us if we don't deliver this.
Yeah.
But we will deliver this. We're pretty confident right now with this. We also, our developer, we have a tenant also, Pasha Terminals. They're also looking at doing another megawatt on their warehouses. That's moving forward. And so we do feel we have delivered and operational right now about 1.5 megawatts with the Crafted and a couple other projects. We have about 2.8, and then we have over about 10 megawatts just in the Hecate agreement. So we should be exceeding our 10 megawatts very soon.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Appreciate, just last week, the mayor, myself, Marcy Edwards, and Mr. Soroka, we flipped the switch, and it was an amazing opportunity. Looking forward, aside from using our terminals to install solar panels and do everything we can, what other locations are you looking at? Are you looking at, I understand some of the parking lots, put up solar farms in our existing parking lots?
Yeah, we're looking at a variety of areas. There's the parking areas on 22nd Street Park is one that's been identified. We're looking at some areas within the marina, on the new marina area that's been identified. Mm-hmm. They're even looking at the aquarium,
right,
the Cabrillo Beach area, which we know, we're going to have to go through a public process. There's a little concern there as far as the aesthetics of the sites. There's also areas within Terminal Island on Pier 400 and some of the POV areas, somewhere where Longshoreman Park. There's some very large areas there, which we feel that there's actually very good
I'm happy to hear you'd like
opportunity
to advance on this by the end of this year to meet the requirement. It's pretty bold. So
yeah, I mentioned Pasha. Yeah. It's very bold. They've actually already delivered all the solar panels to the port. They're stored in one of our warehouses, and so it is a very ambitious program.
And as far as the installation this morning with the mayor, Mr. Price, at Homeboy Industries, are we using disadvantaged workers to help install these solar panels? Throwing a curveball at you, I know, with that look, but is there any opportunity to use disadvantaged workers to install and be a part.
We'll
Would this be
ask-
under the Ports PLA project?
This is covered under a
It is
PLA.
covered?
It's-
Okay.
It's not under our PLA. It's what we told Hecate, as part of our agreement with them, is they need to have a PLA in place to do this work. So we gave them our current PLA, told them to use that as a model for the PLA that they move forward with on theirs. I will check on the disadvantaged worker opportunity, though. We'll be meeting with them tomorrow, so we'll get an update. Front Street Beautification, one of our smaller projects, but I think it's important. This one actually borders the China shipping terminal along Front Street. We actually have been doing some remediation work out there. That is now completed, and we should be advertising this project this month also. The last project I have to update is on the Alta Sea Marine Research Facility. We have completed our wharf alternative studies for this. We were looking at different options on the wharf. Alta Sea is proposing a change in the project phasing and scope. We're waiting for a little bit more detail on that, and I can answer any other questions you may have on any of these projects.
Is the change going to stall the design phase, or is that?
For the Alta Sea, the change?
Yeah.
I believe the intent of the phasing is so that they can actually accelerate the project in certain areas. I think what they've done is they have identified opportunities for some of the current warehousing that initially had been planned for a later phase. So they want to redo the phasing, is my understanding. Right. Redo some of the project scope as far as they had an iconic building at one end of the project. They're still going to have an iconic building, but one that's a little bit more constructible, is what I would say. So there's changes like that they're looking at.
I believe, Mr. Chairman, the purpose of looking at the lease again is to advance and show some progress at Alta Sea. And it's going to benefit Alta Sea and their board and their partners by amending the existing lease agreement. And ultimately, it's going to come before this committee, is that my understanding, on amending a lease?
I believe there's a lease amendment that should be coming here.
For us, Alta Sea, if I can, is what we're hearing in the campaign trail is a huge project for us. Huge. We know ultimately Alta Sea will diverse the workforce. And I understand that the board, Alta Sea, and their supporters are putting together an EDA application, Economic Development Administration application to the federal government. My understanding that the port is a co-applicant of that application. Can you explain to us where we're at with it?
It's my understanding right now, we are ascertaining our obligation under this grant that may come from being the co-applicant. The grant obligates the creation of about 300 jobs, and there's a concern from the port that what would happen if these jobs aren't created. And so currently we're reviewing the grant on our obligation under this grant with our city attorney or the city attorney's office to see if there really is much risk at all.
Yeah. I had an opportunity to meet with Ms. Caruso yesterday and the chairman of the board. They're very concerned because it's time sensitive, this application. We don't want it. It's in jeopardy if we don't advance. The application is due at the end of this month, I believe the 31st of March. Has the port reached out to some of our existing resources here, like the CLA, the CAO's office, Economic Development Department, who are known to apply for these types of grants? Ask them for their feedback, assistance.
It's my understanding we have reached out to EWDD, but I don't think we ever reached out to CAO or CLAs.
Okay. Along with the LA Waterfront College, you hear me advocate for this project. Alta Sea is also a priority, and we feel that in a time where we need to do everything we can to diversify the workforce, to sustain the ongoing development on the waterfront with these types of blue tech, green tech jobs. I'd like to, if I can, Mr. Chairman, get a report back on this critical ED application that Alta Sea and the port will be submitting here in 2 weeks, and also ask the port's council to come and report in 2 weeks on the status and hopeful progress that this $3 million EDA grant will provide for this project. Thank you.
Happy to advance that. I don't see any objection.
That'll be March 15th.
March 15th?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll ask for a report back on that.
And it's important that the city attorney and the council also is present here as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What is, and maybe this could be part of that discussion, what is the funding gap with Alta? I mean, it's a great project. We want to see it move forward. Do you know what the gap is?
I don't know what their gap is as far as from their commitment for the lease and what they have already. I don't know. And I think that's maybe part of the question some of our board members are having is where are they in that fundraising? But we have committed our $58 million. It's programmed in our CIP to do the improvements we need to do. And I know they're working on the fundraising efforts themselves.
They want some shovels on the ground on phase. They're calling it phase 0 by this year. So they do have dollars ready to spend. And I believe what they're asking for is to amend their lease to the point where they can expedite the projects and the monies that are sitting right now.
To allow the rephasing, I think.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, to allow the rephasing.
To allow the
we talked
rephasing of
about
it,
so
right.
that they can get those shovels in the ground.
Okay. So without objection, we'll move forward on that. Colleagues, any comments or questions on any of the top 10 items?
Lastly, Front Street Beautification project, Mr. Chairman, I just want to get a timeline on moving forward on the Front Street project as far as...
We will advertise this month, and usually right after we advertise, you'll see shovels in the ground in about 6 months after we advertise.
And I just leaned over to my colleague, Mr. Bonin, on the design phase of both the Promenade and Town Square and the Wilmington Promenade. I don't understand why it takes so long to put some drawings on paper. So I know you are an engineer, you get it. We need to move and expedite, and I just can't wait till 2017 for this to move forward.
We'll look at, if there's a ways to get it done quicker. They're fairly extensive designs.
I understand that.
We can say, but we understand also the concern.
We can
and
hire a
the
few more
urgency.
people. Hire a few more people to sharpen those pencils and draw those plans.
We hear you.
Right, Jim D'Antona?
Oh, yeah. Go back on the boards, that's fine.
And, the question, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, really quick. Avak forwarded me, while we had the port presence, the federal government's looking at putting together a port performance freight statistics working group. Just want to make sure we have some representation on this working group at the White House.
Yes.
Are we aware of that?
Actually, I saw the email yesterday,
Okay.
and I know our government affairs people have been strategizing.
It's important that we have a
Point.
seat at the table with that.
Yes.
And Avak's here in the audience for the record. Thank Avak for being here. Would you like to speak on the...
Yeah, we're about to close the hearing, so now's the time, Avak. Now, yeah. Now, this item is actually not an action item, so Mr. Piscano, if we want to get, we've informally asked for the report. If we want to actually get the formal report, we'll need to do a quick motion before these 2 weeks so we can have it, so there'll be a
Okay.
council file to attach it to.
Yeah, I figured
For-
that. Okay, I know there's a
next-
report back. We'll drop a motion, Mr. Chairman, tomorrow.
Perfect, we'll get that going, so it's
But
now-
just know the urgency of scheduling it.
I'm
Thank you so
committed to it.
much.
And we've telegraphed it. It's an informal request. We'll put that in to put a placeholder so we can have a discussion on it in the next hearing.
Thank you.
And this item doesn't require any action. So, Mr. Espinosa, where does that take us? Is there any other items before us?
No, Mr. Chair.
And we've heard all public comment. So with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.